Hello, everyone, and welcome to the You Only Go Once Yogo podcast. This is episode 3, and we're joined by co-host Eileen Grimes. I'm Cheryl Cantafio, and our guest today is Jaeden Roberts.
Today, we're bringing on someone very special to me, and as a bit of a level setting for our listeners, earlier this week told me that fear is cock blocking you. Let's just say there are so many quotable moments with this amazing human. I'd like to welcome Jaeden Roberts to Yogo. Jaeden has been my intuitive, spiritual, physical, and emotional guide in 2022. She helps others own their inner wisdom, truth, and healing capacities through her therapeutic practice at Jaeden Roberts Counseling and Alternative Therapies. Jaeden never holds back from telling you what you need to hear and is a master of healthy boundaried empathy. She's an enthusiastic artist and cook, avid runner and nature lover, an addicted traveler, a grateful parent, and a writer. I am so grateful to know her and extremely excited to share her magnificence with you all today. Welcome, Jaeden.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. I feel really welcome, and I'm super excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this all week, so thanks for having me.
So, Jaeden, we normally start off with a bit of questions, and one of the things that came up in our initial discovery was that you have a trip that you'd like to share with us. So if you can, share the best trip that you've taken and how it's impacted your life.
I had to think a lot about this one. I've done a lot of travel, and I mean, not as much as some, but quite a bit. And I feel like travel impacts my life every single time. There's something about getting outside your own life that, like, upon re-entry, I feel like sometimes upon re-entry, I kind of get the bends, but it almost always changes my life in some way. And so I kind of pondered that question and contemplated several trips that I'd taken. I spent one summer living out of my car and traveling all over the South and camping and that, like just the being on my own. And I had no plan for that one. So having to literally making decisions about which direction to go as I approached an intersection. That one was a big growth experience in the sense that it really pushed me up around my limits or limitations or, fears, that sort of thing. But the one that really came to mind, I went to Turkey and Crete. And I was trying to remember when it was. I'm terrible with time, but I'm pretty sure it was my 34th birthday that I had on the island of Crete. So I went to Turkey for 3 weeks and traveled mostly with a friend while we were in Turkey. And then I spent a little time in Turkey. He kind of went his way and went out into Eastern Turkey, and I didn't go. And I spent a little bit more time in Turkey, and then I flew down to Crete. And at that point in my life, I was very much in the thick of my healing journey. And specifically, I had made it my personal vendetta to have a healthy sexuality.
Love it.
Which I was thinking on my run this morning, have I accomplished that? I turned 34 on that trip, and I am now 51. Have I got there yet? And I'm not really sure of the answer, to be honest. But I not only did I want to work through specific sexual trauma that I'd had, but really I felt like culture had kind of negatively impacted my sexuality. There was just a lot of aspects of the way our culture frames and handles sexuality that had a pretty negative impact on me, having grown up in the 70s and 80s. And I feel like there's a lot of aspects of that are getting dramatically better pretty quickly, although we seem to be in a bit of a backslide right now in some ways. But it was just my thing that I was bound and determined, hell-bent on having a healthy sexuality. And so this trip was interesting in that regard because I was doing a lot of reading and processing and that sort of thing. And I was also in the midst at that point in my life, I was partially through the training that I did in shamanism and depth hypnosis. And I don't remember exactly which of the programs I was in, but I had been living in Washington, traveling these courses, and then kind of in the midst of that took this trip. And as I think about the trip, there was a couple of things. The reason that I went to Crete was that Crete kept coming up in, I was dreaming about it. It was coming up in my shamanic journey work. I kept ending up in Crete.
I had a feeling this was coming out because I was going to ask you how, because I know a lot of your trips come from sort of these inspirations and things that you're seeing. So I was curious as to how Crete came into the mix of all of that.
For some of us who are geographically challenged, where is Crete exactly?
It's one of the Grecian islands. It's off the coast of mainland Greece, and it's one of the islands. I couldn't tell you in what order, but
no, that's all good. That's all good. All good.
General area.
There's a bunch of them, and I'm kind of geographically challenged also. also. But as I was doing the journey work, all this stuff kept coming up, and it was weird. This is how journey work works for those of you who have done it or are familiar. All of this stuff was coming up about the history around the Mycenaeans and the Minoans, which I had known nothing about previously. So then I had to do all this research. There was all this stuff coming up about the Minoan culture, which was actually the last, one of the last matriarchal cultures that was kind of a stronghold. And the Minoans had really developed systems of medicine, like arts, actually fashion. They had a very developed fashion thing going on down there. And the Mycenaeans came from more mainland and took over and just kind of decimated the Minoans. And to my understanding, there's some sort of a natural disaster that preceded the Mycenaeans coming over. So the Minoans were kind of weakened because they were on an island, and there had been, I don't remember, maybe I don't even know if there had been an earthquake or a tsunami or what sort of hurricane sort of thing had happened. And then the Mycenaeans came in and took them over. But one of the things that kept coming up over and over again was this thing that the Minoan women did to reinstate their virginity. And virginity to them did not mean they didn't use the word the same way that we do. To them, to be a virgin meant a woman fully in possession of herself. So no pieces of herself given away to other people, and not holding pieces of other people either. So it was kind of this like clearing of your own slate, aligning with your true self, getting in your authenticity, like getting all of your little octopus arms out of other people and kind of gathering all of your energy back to yourself. So I had traveled all around Turkey for these weeks, and then I went down to Crete, and the northern part of Crete was a little challenging for me. I was not prepared for the aggressiveness of the men there.
Oh, okay.
And so that was a challenge. And that actually that'll like lead in. I was needing to do I was doing work on my boundaries, but I was so not there yet.
Yeah.
That was a challenge. But I ended up traveling down to the southern coast of Crete. And I wish I could remember the name of the little village, but it's a village that, interestingly, a lot of American hippies had moved to in the 60s and 70s and lived in caves on these beaches.
Huh.
Interesting.
Yeah, they'd had a fairly strong American influence. Most of the people there spoke English. So I made my way down around to this little village, which was just utterly delightful. And it was the eve of my 34th birthday. I'm trying to remember if it was before or after. I think it was after. So I'll try to tell the story in order. I had met these guys who were super sweet and respectful, and they had friends who worked in hotels. And so we had spent the evening going around to hotels and eating at their, what do I want to say? All of the hotels had like an all-you-can-eat food bar. And so we just gone and like eaten their food and drank, I think it's Rocky, that they have this like anise flavored liquor that they drink. And so we drank that. So I wasn't drunk, but I definitely was a bit impaired.
Sure.
And so I got this idea that I was going to hike over to this completely enclosed beach. That's the one where the caves were, where the hippies had lived, called the Red Beach, because it had red sand. But you had to hike in there, and it's actually a nude beach by day. Although I got this idea that I was going to hike over there in order to like do this thing to reinstate my virginity at midnight as it became my birthday, and actually the end of my Saturn return. This is my 34th birthday. So hiking there was like, it was like bouldering. There it was dark, like it's midnight, and I was there. My birthday is the end of October, so it was late October, and it was not a full moon. And so I'm like bouldering over this small mountain, and there was goats, like mountain goats around me. And I made my way thinking I was just the coolest. And I got down there. And the way that the Minoan women would do this thing is that they would dip themselves in the ocean 3 times, I think on the new moon. And I think it was the new moon, or really close to that. They would submerge themselves in the ocean 3 times. And this is how they would reinstate their virginity. So I get over, I strip off my clothes. There's of course nobody on this beach because it's midnight and you have to hike in there.
Yeah.
And I dip myself in the ocean 3 times. And my plan was to sleep on the beach because I thought that was going to be just the coolest thing ever. And I brought what I had, which was like sweats and some towels from a hotel and like the beach towel that I was traveling with. So I dipped myself in the ocean 3 times, did the thing, got out, I'm shivering, I like dry off, put on my sweats, I lay out the towels and I lay down and like put a towel over me and I close my eyes and I start to sleep and I'm like, there is no way I can sleep here. It is so cold. So I laid there for a few minutes with my eyes closed. And this is the best part of the story. As I opened my eyes, a meteor, not like a comet, not like a shooting star, but like a comet with a tail goes blazing across the sky directly above me. So that was the culmination of my birthday. With that, I packed it up and I hiked back over that draw and I slept in my car because on the island of Crete, if you don't get to the hotels before the people who run them go to bed, you're just out of luck. So I slept in my car. And then I think it was the next day, or maybe it had been earlier that day. I was out walking around just in this little village, and there was right along the shoreline, there was kind of like a plaza, and then there was just rocks that went down into the shore. Most of the shores were rocky as opposed to sandy. And I felt really drawn down to like hike down in there. So I'd hike down in there and I kind of sat and was meditating. And what I heard, what I was told was, you left a piece of yourself here. This is going to make me cry. You left a piece of yourself here. And I said, well, what is that piece? And they said, you left your joy at being a woman here because you knew it was going to get really difficult for a really long time. And so I had gathered that piece back. And so that is the trip that changed my life. I don't even to this day feel like I can fully wrap my mind around everything that happened as a result of that and came out of that. But it literally changed my way of being in the world and what I believed myself to be on this planet to do.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing.
That's my story.
Yeah. So one of the things that I am amazed about constantly with you is your ability to be open to the possibilities that the universe, or whatever we want to call that, is calling to you, right? Even through healing and working through that healing, you were still open to like these calls to come to Crete, to come to this beach specifically. Like, how do you do that? And do you, I mean, so what is, for our listeners, like what does that look like sometimes on a regular basis? Do you do the dipping still with the three things sometimes?
That is such a good question. I am proud to say, again, referencing the second question about where I'm going to talk about boundaries, I am proud to say that I don't need a new virginity as frequently as I used to.
That's great.
I don't give parts of myself away, and I don't take on parts of other people like I used to. I feel like arduously, much like hiking over that mountain to get to the beach, like I've made my way to a place where I almost never need to clear my own slate, because I just like I've figured out how to like give without giving myself away and receive without taking other people's stuff on. And so very infrequently do I need that. And as far as the other piece of the question, like how do I stay open to that? I don't know that I can really even take the credit. I feel like for whatever reason, my way of being, and I've been told by several psychics that I'm an alien, so maybe it's just that I'm an alien.
I love it. I'm in.
It's in my astrological chart too, apparently. It just happens to me, and it has since I was little. And I think both of my grandmothers were very psychic. One of them saw ghosts. The other one knew things that were going to happen before they did all the time. So first of all, in my family, that wasn't weird.
Yeah.
And second of all, I'm a believer that there's a genetic predisposition to some of this stuff, that like some families are really good at sports. We aren't. Like this is a thing that runs in our family. And I think like sports, it's something that you can definitely cultivate within yourself, but that some folks are just kind of born more living in a more liminal space, kind of between the worlds. And I was one of them. And I also, I lived in the country, and I had busy parents, and I had one sibling, but she was quite a bit younger and not into the same things as me. So I spent a lot of time by myself in nature. And I think that also really influenced that. And my grandparents, my parents and my grandparents both, especially grandparents on one side, were very attuned to nature. So I was taken camping, and I was taught about plants. I was given a horse when I was 10 and given free rein to just get on that horse and be gone until dark, which I look back on and I'm like, oh, I would be hard pressed to let my kid do that. But I'm really glad that I, and it was not a small horse or a mellow horse. I just spent a lot of time kind of communing with the natural world. And I think that really opens the door to that sort of thing.
Absolutely. I mean, I've definitely found there's just something seeing the greater, right? There's something about being in this greater space than ourselves, at least for me, right? And that when you sit in it, it does something to you. And I mean, I can totally see that. I appreciate that you share that other people, though might not be as predisposed to it as you, still have the capacity to learn towards it.
Yeah. I think it's a part of, like we know that there's so much of the brain that science is like, we don't even use these parts. I'm like, I'm not sure we don't use those parts. We just may not be consciously aware of what's going on in those parts, but I think I think those aptitudes are part of those parts of the brain that science thinks we don't use, that we just haven't yet figured out what's going on there. And that some people are just naturally born with more access to them, in the same way that some people are born with spatial relations. I'm not one of them. But you can work on those things and develop those parts of the brain. The brain is completely plastic. It changes throughout your lifespan, utterly dependent on your experiences and how you use it. I have actually found that just being around like psychic, if you want to call it that, or intuitive people, tends to activate that part of the brain in folks. Like hang out with me and it'll rub off on you.
I mean, yes. Correct. So I know, no, it is. I could talk to you obviously all day. I'm going to push Cheryl into this conversation as someone I know that is right. You're growing in some of the openness. Like even when I started working with Jaeden, there was this growth to openness in this space. And I would love to get your thoughts, Cheryl.
Yeah, I think it's all fascinating, right? Because there's different ways to connect with people. And what a gift that you have, that it is, I'm going to say something and I hope it's not offensive. It's like a second sight. So you can kind of see, where people are going, where people are heading. Potentially, you have that intuitive piece about you that I would imagine really helps in your day to day. I would imagine that's also fantastic for kids as well. Like, haha, I see you. And also kind of knowing, I think kids have it so tough in this day and age. Like there's just so much, like with cyberbullying and the social pressures and everything like that. Like so I am child free, and I see it a lot with my friends who have kids where they wish they could be a little more, they're fantastic parents, and they also wish that they could have a little more insight as to what's going on in their noggins, right? So I think for you, and the fact that is generational is such a special thing. I also have to say, I turned 50 this year. So your whole piece around
happy birthday.
Thank you. How you kicked off your next trip around the sun at age 34 is phenomenal. And I wish I had talked to you sooner. I guess for me, the next question is like, how is it in your life? How do you apply that very special gift that you have? Do you feel like it emanates like daily, or is it something where you're just talking to someone and it's like, oh yeah, I have to tell them something. This is really important.
That's a really good question. And happy birthday, by the way. 50s are amazing. It's my favorite decade yet. It's kind of a mix. And I can't say that I've always handled it very gracefully. When I was younger, like everything comes to me by way of a felt sense, and then I can kind of make sense of it in my head. Sometimes, not always, but most of the time. And when I was younger, I think I just spent a lot of time really overwhelmed by what I was feeling, or kind of confused, especially when what appeared to be happening and what I could intuitively feel was actually going on didn't match. It was confusing. But as I've gotten older and have kind of cultivated this and like figured out how to use it or how to be with it, I definitely, again, with the boundaries, there was a period of time where my own boundaries were total crap, and I would like tell people stuff inappropriately or be like nosing around in people's energy when I shouldn't have been. Some people got real annoyed with me, and it also can be sort of scary to folks. Like I thought I was being real helpful. Part of it, I also had some ego stuff wrapped up in there, to be totally honest.
Who doesn't?
But, yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly.
Who doesn't?
So
yeah.
At this point, it like still occasionally stuff will come through. It's like, I think because I've integrated it with work, which I like was a therapist for quite a while without really integrating this stuff. And then it kind of like the talent, the skill, whatever it is, kind of ran rampant in my personal life. Since I've given it a place to be and to do something useful with itself, it seems to interfere with my personal life less, which is great. Interferes may be kind of a strong word. So it's super handy at work to like lots of times people will be talking along and I literally am like hearing no, that's not what's going on. Here's what's really, or like, here's what underlies that. Like, it's not like, it looks like here's what's going on, but here's what's really going on. And if you come in at this direction, you're going to be able to like unhook this thing or whatever it is. So that's really great. Occasionally in my personal life, I still do have some like blinding thing come through about people or for people. It's taken me a long time to get to where I really trust it too. I worked literally as a psychic in New Orleans. I was a phone psychic for a while, and doing it that blatantly, even as long as I've been working with this stuff at that point, it felt a little like I didn't completely trust myself to like show up on the phone and know something useful and accurate. And so, but I think all of these things have kind of taught me how to use it, but also taught me how to negotiate the boundaries around it and how to not be a jerk with it.
I love that you said you gave it a home. I think that's a wonderful way of putting it, right? Because again, sometimes we have gifts and it doesn't matter, right? You obviously have this gift. There are other people that have different gifts. And there's sometimes you just don't know what to do with them. And the fact that you've been able to identify something that, number one, helps others, and number two, centers you, it's really a gift. It's a wonderful thing that you've crafted for yourself. I think that's great.
Thanks. It does feel like it feels like a gift to me. In the same, like I paint, I cook, I do all these creative things, but I don't often find flow like what artists talk about, or like people who write poetry, which I used to do, which I don't anymore. But that sense of like being on the planet doing what you're meant to be doing, like really doing the intuitive work, that's where I feel that. I feel so fortunate and honored to be able to do it, to like have a job where I can show up and do this thing that gives me that feeling. It's great.
That's awesome.
I will attest to saying that it is amazing, and I'm very grateful for it, for you.
Aw, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this kind of leads into, the next question that we have really is this: what advice would you give your younger self? I know we've sort of been alluding to it in different things, so definitely want to just sort of jump in from that side. So, if you were to talk to your younger self, one, what age would you want to be that you feel like this person would need advice? And then what would you want to tell them?
Oh, that. Well, my blanket answer is boundaries. Like, get fierce sooner. Be willing to be fierce on your own behalf sooner. And there's so many ages. As you say that, it literally, that thing where you like hold a mirror and you hold it up to another mirror and it creates that thing where you can like see the reflection through infinity. Like when you ask me to answer that question, I'm like, there's so many like moments in time and previous selves. It's like that, like all the way back to maybe like through other lifetimes, I'm pretty certain. So I don't know how far back I would need to go, because I think it's something that my soul's been working on for more than just this time. But definitely, I would say definitely by the time I was 4 years old, I needed to start hearing messages around like refusal skills, ability to say no, how to trust yourself when somebody else is telling you that you're wrong or crazy, or like when your truth is inconvenient. How do you, and somebody who has, like, especially if they have authority over you, is telling you that your truth is wrong because it's inconvenient to them. How do you stay in that truth? And how do you, when women in our culture are so socialized to be so benign, and so like when we do set boundaries so frequently, it's like, oh, please don't, we are so terrified of being perceived as not nice, because a woman, like anger is the thing that is the impetus for boundary setting. Right. And women's anger is really pathologized in our culture. I mean, it's been 3 generations since you could be put in a facility simply for being angry as a woman. Like that went on up into the 40s, and I think even into the 50s, that you could be put in an asylum for that easily. So women have such a struggle making peace with their anger in the first place in order to even hear the message that the anger is bringing about what's not okay in their life and where the boundaries need to be set. And then when they go about setting boundaries, they want to do it like they still want to be nice and do it in this nice way. And unfortunately, it would be wonderful if that were the world that we lived in. But sometimes you got to speak to people in a language they can hear. And I always tell people, like, set your boundary once, completely calmly and compassionately, If you need to explain it or clarify it or reiterate, again, by the third time, you should be starting to get annoyed. And by the fourth, you should be fierce. Like if you're having to say the thing 4 times, they're not trying to hear you.
Right.
So
Right.
speak in a language that they can understand. And so I did a series of paintings a while back. And the final paint, well, I guess it's the second to last painting actually, was this character who, when I was doing all this work on this, who was showing up in my journeys. And I think that she's probably an ancestor. I know that my family was in Prussia, what was then Prussia, what is now Eastern Germany, kind of on the border of Poland. We were there during those times, and I had been told all my life that I had some Native American and blah blah blah, and then I did the 23andMe, and there was absolutely none, but there was Asian, and I was like, that's real weird. Where'd that come from? I suspect that we were a diaspora that came up out of Asia, and then when they became persecuted, took refuge in Prussia, Poland, that area. They were able to be there. I can't say that they were necessarily welcomed. But this character started showing up from that period of time. Her name, interestingly, she told me her name was Victoria, like in victory, she kept saying. And she was fierce as fuck when she needed to be. And she was this beautiful thing in this red skirt, but she kept a knife in her boot. And so I did a lot of work with her around, you can be this beautiful flowy thing, but have the knife in your boot, like have it there in case you need it. You don't need to be wielding it all the time. You shouldn't be wielding it all the time, but have this capacity for fierceness on your own behalf so that when it comes down to it, you can do that thing and like get comfortable with that so that it's available to you in the moment. So I did this painting. Yeah. It's a sunset and she's leaping. And so you can just kind of see the outline of her, but it's red. She's kind of illuminated by the sunset. And so her legs are kind of like the splits and she's leaping. And beneath her is this little girl that's probably about 4. Was making me emotional, in a red dress dancing.
I love it.
That's very cool.
I love the fierceness on your own behalf.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, women are so fierce on other people's behalf.
It's funny that you brought up, like, if you're telling somebody 4+ times, they're clearly not listening. In our previous episode, we just talked to a mother and daughter duo where the daughter was like, Mom, I'd like to go to Mount Kilimanjaro. And she's like, that's nice. She came back a second time. Mom, I'd like to go to Mount Kilimanjaro. That's great. We probably can't do that because we don't climb stairs. She finally came back the third time and said, Mom, I'd really like to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And I think that the mother finally heard what she was saying. It wasn't so much that she needed to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. She needed to do something that was outside of herself and special, and also climb Mount Kilimanjaro. I mean, it wasn't just that. But there was something more to it. It was a bigger, meaningful piece. And I love that you talk about that. Like, we have to find our own voice, and we have to find the people who will listen to us, because there's something to be said about claiming your own, who you are as a person, but also finding those people who are your people, that understand you, that love you, that hear you and see you, right?
Yeah. And that don't try to make you smaller.
Exactly. I love this because I think this conversation folds so nicely into the next question, because we talk a lot about you only go once. Like we're screaming here, like, yo, go do it, have that fun over fear aspect. And to your point, like, women for years have been like, be nice, be kind, be this, not necessarily be heard, go out and do bold things. Right. So my question to you is, for those people that are trying to conquer their fun over fear, what advice would you give them?
I think that's also some fierceness on your own behalf, is to be able to kind of listen to the rumblings from within yourself. And I think generally the rumblings from within yourself are also being echoed or reinforced kind of in like the universe. There's usually messages, I find, that are kind of coming along that are urging you kind of towards, like this young woman with the Mount Kilimanjaro thing, urging you towards the mythos of your life. Like I'm a big fan of Jean Houston and her idea that we all lead these mythic lives, and that we're all part of this larger story, and that we are the heroes and the heroines of larger stories that are playing out within humanity. And yesterday, like, I get weird themes in therapy where a bunch of people in the span of the same day will be having the same conversation, which I'm absolutely a believer that the existence of a collective unconscious, because all these people are working on the same things. And so I think they're like being able to conceptualize the idea that you would be called to something akin to a hero's journey within your own life, and that these things that you feel called to do really are that important, that they're that important for you, and they're important for the very evolution of humanity, so it's bigger than you. Me going to Crete, that's so much bigger than me. Or this young woman climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. There's meaning to that within the context of her own life, but within the larger picture as well. So I think it takes a little bit of it takes bravery, but also I think fierceness, because a lot of these things that I've done in my life, I moved to New Orleans in the wake of the hurricane. There have been so many things that people have been like, "You crazy, what are you thinking?" So I've had to have this like fierceness on my own behalf to protect, almost in the way that you would protect a creative endeavor, or you would protect a child that you're gestating, like these things that I feel are mine to do. You have to kind of protect them, especially in the planning stages, because people are going to tell you you're crazy, or at least question you, and if you get pulled into that, you're going to talk yourself out of it. So I think bravery and this fierceness on behalf of the protection of your own life.
Oh, I love
are
that.
the keys.
That's great.
Definitely. I will say that Cheryl is in my group of people that I am always like, hey, I have an idea. You're going to be one of the first to hear it.
Yep.
And to know that it's full on encourage. I mean, it's in the same, right? It's both of us do the same thing. And having those people is so incredibly important, because they champion you. And this podcast is a testament to that.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah, I love that Eileen and I are usually, it's virtual. She's in Spokane. I'm in Pennsylvania. So usually she'll text me at night and say, "Hear me out. I've got this idea." And I'm like, "Oh, cool. We're going on an adventure at 10 o'clock at night. Let's see what happens." And to what Eileen said, this podcast is an emanation of that. So it's very cool, because she's been, of the two of us, I think she's more fierce than I am. But I love being along for the journey. And I love that part of our friendship, I've been able to discover bits of bravery in myself as well. And I've seen Eileen discover bits of bravery in herself too. It's very cool.
Yeah, as have I. So it sounds like you guys are safe in each other's inspiration incubators.
Absolutely.
Yes. 100%.
Definitely.
Yep.
For sure. So with that, right?
Yeah,
so
I think that's important to have.
It is. And it's knowing, it's the knowingness of that. I think there's a gut feeling, right? You're like, when I get this, who intuitively, or whatever, in my gut, whatever you want to call that, do I want to tell first? And that, or who do I not want to tell? And I think that gives you so much,
right?
You really do know.
Yeah, for sure.
So conquering fun over fear, or growth over fear. I like that concept too, where it's not just, yes, I will go paragliding, and yes, Jaeden, I know that you will go on the trips and all the things. And it can also be growth over fear, right? So we can approach something that will provide us the ability to grow, that will encounter the fears that we have in our lives. So with that being said, we create, or I have the "this is happening" list, right? Of the fears or the fun that we want to really start working towards. What is on your "this is happening" list, and what are you doing next?
I'm so excited about this question. And I think I would have answered it completely differently even 3 days ago. Although this is the thing that I've been working on, but I think I hadn't really conceptually framed it. And it was the theme of the day yesterday. So I'm going to talk about it. The fear that I'm working on conquering right now, again, making me sort of emotional as I talk about it, is rest. I am finding that I definitely was raised in a family on both sides, and I think most of us were, where the women didn't really rest. Like they were, my grandmother on the one side, she would make this amazing dinner and she wouldn't even sit down and eat it, because she was up and down and up and down and up and down, like making sure that everybody had what they needed, and blah, 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 blah. These very, very, very busy women who would never be still, really. I mean, like maybe she'd sit, but she was crocheting, or,
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like when you look at, I've been studying this integrative health practitioner stuff, and we did a unit a while back on the balance of yin and yang. Yin yang being the masculine, active, doing, and it utilizes, like you take in calories and then you burn calories, like yang is burning calories, doing things. And yin, on the other hand, is stillness and receptivity and rest and restoration and like taking in. It's where you like rebuild yourself. And also like that's where all the intuition happens, really. Like you're not going to have great intuition if you can't be still, you know? So there's also this, what comes to you in the stillness and the rest, and the ways that we need that to restore and rebuild ourselves as we go through the day. And what I keep thinking is that it's so ironic in our culture that I find in my practice, and you know, like that's a biased sample for sure, but that women feel more pressure to be constantly busy and to be constantly doing something and productive and like cleaning or tidying or making something or caretaking or participating or giving in whatever way, or all of these things. Like we've almost completely eliminated the yin in women, which is the feminine element. You know, and so no wonder women are anxious and depressed and suffering from autoimmune disorders at record high rate, epidemic rates. The alcoholism rate among women in their 40s and 50s has skyrocketed in the last, it's the fastest growing group, and it's not growing a little bit more than other groups. It's dramatically more. I don't have statistics. So for me, I like through really no choice, because I too ended up with a mild autoimmune disorder that I'm working on battling back. The balance between the yin and the yang, between the action and the rest, and the like the taking in and the giving out, was real off. And like I'm guilty of it. It's culture, but it's culture, it's my family, but I'm guilty of it even in the sense that like when I had any free time, I felt like I should be doing art. I should be utilizing this time. Like, how do I maximize my life? And what I eventually discovered was that I was destroying my life by not resting. And especially in the wake of COVID, you know, so many of us were working and homeschooling and whatever else. So right now I am, with great audacity and rebelliousness, being still. I am a conscientious objector to busy culture. When people are like, hey, you keeping busy? And I'm like, no, I am specifically avoiding keeping busy. You know, and there is a lot of, I find myself wading like hip deep in my own self-judgment that I'm, you know, like I'm projecting myself into other people's heads and then judging myself because I don't have my kid in 47 activities and I'm not doing all the things. There's a lot of things that I'm saying no to, but I am as content and at peace with myself and my life as I have ever been. It's not exciting in the ways that it was when I was doing a ton of traveling and things, but it has this richness and depth that I am sometimes almost moved, like brought to my knees by. It's just lovely. So that's the thing I'm working on right now.
Oh my gosh, I love that. You know, we there's always like this a goal-oriented, build, more, all the things. And to know ourselves is to have to be in that moment, right? And to take that rest and to see inside ourselves.
Yeah.
What a gift to give yourself to balance that out. I am absolutely guilty of it, hands down, as you can see, doing a podcast. But this is fun. This for me, though, is some of the rest. This is the fun conversations and having the moments to really think deeply rather than be caught up in the, did I call the pediatrician and make the appointments for all the things? This gives me the moment to kind of sit in it with other people and have these amazing conversations. But I raise my hand, I do not do that enough. And I love that idea and thought.
And I love too, because I think when we entered 2020, I think everybody was going, oh, this is going to be a roaring 20s redux. This is going to be great. And then the pandemic hit and we were still busier than ever and still combating something that we had no idea how long it was going to be around and that still exists. Jaeden, I'm 100% behind you with your movement of the restful 20s. That is something I could get behind, because I know just in talking with several people, we're all pretty tired, and it would be nice to just slow down just a little bit and reclaim that space for yourself and reclaim that piece of you that kind of goes like, okay, this is for me. This is, you know, not doing the 20 gazillion things. I've seen both women and men in my life that are just going until they're at the brink of exhaustion. you hope it doesn't come to that, right? You hope that it doesn't come to the restful 20s when we're all just crashing. So I love that you invested in our violently aware that you need the rest and that you're promoting that. And I think that's rest gives way to creativity and innovation and thinking about the things that you really want to do. So thank you for sharing that advice with us.
I also want to say that Jaeden has this book, Dancing on a Three-Legged Stool. Jaeden, where can people get this? This book is amazing. I have gone through bits and pieces of it where I've needed it, right? It's beautiful because you can kind of consume it as you need it, as the things that call to you allow you to open up within yourself. And I've appreciated it so much for that. And it's just given me a lot of things. So I want other people who listen to have access to be able to buy this. Where can people get this book if they're interested in getting that?
First, thank you. And I'm so glad that you're getting something out of it. And secondly, Amazon or my office. I got a box of them in my office. If you happen to be in Spokane, Washington, get a hold of me. I'll hook you up. I'll sign it for you.
There you go. I don't think you've signed. Did you sign mine? I'm going to have to bring it in next time we talk.
If I didn't bring it in,
I will.
I deeply regret that I dropped the ball on that. If I did.
Okay. All right, Cheryl, I wanted to make sure because this
that was fair. Yep.
So many gold nuggets and things for me, especially, I know we talked about it a little bit, but this whole balance of masculine and feminine energy within ourselves, there's a lot that's in this book about that, and highly recommend taking a look at that to support becoming these really whole versions of ourselves where we're not going one way or the other, and really seeing what that masculine and feminine part of you really looks like. It's been wonderfully insightful for me.
Thanks.
Okay, back to you, Cheryl.
All good, all good. Jaeden, again, thank you so much for your time. Everybody, please check out Jaeden's book. Jaeden Roberts, thank you on behalf of Eileen Grimes and myself, Cheryl Cantafio. Always remember, you only go once. Embrace fun over fear and your inner yoga. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.